Hi, welcome to the first episode of Hydra's Den. This was made mainly to try and help people on various platforms I've seen people asking for help on. Hi, Funny Junk. Um, I'm going to be your host, Hydra. I'm here with co-host Golem. Uh,
Yes.
yeah,
Hello.
yeah. So basically, I've been doing D&D, Only War, a bunch of regular tabletop RPGs for I think 6 years now. I think I've gotten a fair amount of experience. I've done a bit of reading about stuff. I'm not going to say I'm an expert by any means, but I'm hoping that by making this, I can kind of provide a bit of insight for new DMs. That's really what I'm aiming to do here. This is aimed at people who have, figured out what rules you're going with, what system you're playing. I'm not going to tell you what system to play, which one's better, 3.5 or 5e, or mutants and masterminds, or whatever. I'm not going to say that. That depends on you, depends on your players. Um, Additionally, I don't have all the answers. Don't, if you're a more experienced DM and I make a mistake and you come in, actually, man, I, I don't know. I don't know everything, but I hope that I have some general experience. I screwed up enough times and I can try and help you a bit. So, me and Golem, we're going to go through a bit of that stuff. Okay? Okay. So, the first topic we're going to be going over, I was hoping to go over, is the topic of if you don't know the rules. So, you know your rules, right? You've got your game, but you don't have a story to play. This is a very, very common issue. By the way, anyone in the chat, if you want to, come in, ask some questions, there's a link to the Discord. We'll be bringing people on to do some Q&A a little bit later. So, back to the topic though. If you know the rules for what you're playing, basically you want to be, the idea here is you want to be a DM, but you don't know how to do it. Maybe you're too self-conscious to tell your own story. Maybe, it's a lot of work to make a story. Maybe you're just too lazy. I'm not judging. Regardless of the reason, though, if you can't make your own story, simply steal another story and reskin it. So that sounds, a little shitty, uh, but it's not that big of a problem. So the point of this is you want to do something with your friends, with whoever your players may be. You want to tell a story, and you want to have a little bit of fun. So that means you have to steal the plot to Aladdin, and just no, we're not in wherever that took place. We're in the Middle East, wherever, it doesn't matter. We are in the legendary elven kingdom of Sandyland. Doesn't matter where you are, but if you need to, reskin it just to get that across, it's fine, because really at the heart of what you're doing is you're playing with someone else. The players are going to change up your story. They'll bring in their own content. They're going to bring in their own original take on it. you know Golub, if you have any experience with this.
Sure. I actually have very, very limited experience with running D&D. I've just started, so I've run maybe 2 or 3 games so far, and they were single session games, so they weren't, epic,
Yeah.
adventures by far. But I do agree that, yeah, if you can't really, time does come when you can't really just pull something out of your head immediately, and maybe you're running a session in 2 days, and you can't really be bothered to spend every single waking moment kind of trying to put something together. You just want something real quick, just because you only got 2 days left. So yeah, in that case, I absolutely agree. You should be able to just grab something, reskin it real quick, and use that instead. Because people have done this before you, and I think it's not always necessary to reinvent the wheel. It could be fun, could be good, but not necessary,
Uh,
right?
yeah, no, you're completely right there, actually. The idea that if you're going to be playing it straight, that often I find when I do things like that, when your players call you out, that's actually a great moment, because right there, you can run a whole bunch of ways. You could play it straight. You could let the players, have their fun predicting. Oh yeah, they already know this story, so they know the plot twists. Or you could throw a curveball right there. Improvisation is such a key thing to this type of play. Making up stuff that nobody expected and adding it to the mix. the freshness of that is gonna make things more fun for everyone. And when the players make a mistake, due to some assumed knowledge rather than something that they've actually been told, I mean, it's a lot more satisfying for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. The idea here, though, really is the most important thing is making sure everyone has fun. Because if you're just gonna go through, actually, that being said, if you go through and every time they predict something, you just decide to be arbitrary and say, nope, that's not it. It's the insert opposite here. You're going to just have a lot of pissed off players with you. You got to find a nice little middle ground between mixing up everything and playing it straight. It's definitely an important thing, but for your first try, just take what you need. Everyone's learning, and it's the most important thing is that you go out and do it. Okay, is there anything else? If you have anything else you wanted to add, Golem?
No, I mean, generally, yeah, I agree with basically all of that. It's more about reading your players and just having fun with your friends, or just your players in general, really. If someone's not having fun, then you can adapt your story as you see fit. And a lot of it is experience. Like, I know for a fact that in my second playthrough, I've done a lot better than the first one, and I think it's just going to keep getting better and better and better the more work you put into it, right? Just like everything else.
Yeah, definitely. That's exactly it. The more experience you get, the better you'll become. So don't sweat the little things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That being said, though, there is a second topic. This is the second topic. The idea. I have so many ideas, and I have all the best ideas. I have the most amazing ideas. I love them. Best ideas ever. So this one I fell for. This one I fell for hard. This is the most conventional DM trap, I'd call it. It's the idea is you've got your system, you've got your plans, you're writing up a storm. It's great, but you decide to just keep writing and writing because you've got all these great ideas. They're going to do this and that. My first thing, I jumped the gun and ended up writing about a year's worth of material. Some of that material, some of that material we still haven't gone through. It's ridiculous because, first off, you cannot predict what your players are going to do. So all of this work that you're doing, half of it is probably going to go out the window. You have no idea what they're going to do. You have no idea what people are going to, decide is the right way. Maybe that quest critical legendary sword that you put in there, they're going to sell it. This is actually a very direct experience I've had where I have given someone a nice, beautiful legendary sword as treasure, and the players just proceeded to immediately, sell it to the first vendor they found. Oh, kills me.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. This is something that will really start it, because this is something that'll creep up on you. This is the scary part about this. This DM trap of having all these ideas. Actually, there's another friend I know that I was coaching with a bit. I was helping him out, and he has the exact same problem where he'll make a whole lot of content. He has all these great ideas, and then the players will either get bored or they'll trash it. It's just, God, it's not even just him. I've seen quite a few DMs do this. It's the idea you make grandiose plans for things that would literally take years to happen because a lot of these people haven't considered, a lot of DMs haven't considered the idea that the players either A, may decide to derail what you're doing, or B, your players may not be all that into your session. That's a really serious thing to consider. Maybe your friends just don't want to play D&D anymore. So if you've put all that effort in and then that suddenly gets thrown out the window, this is a real big spirit breaker for a lot of DMs where they lose one session, they go, no, I'm not doing it again. That was terrible. I put in all this work. You can't let this get to you. And this is what I mean, So many DMs will not recover from this. They'll just fall into a slump and, either they'll lash out at players or they'll just shut down completely. So you're going to say something?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I see this every time, basically. I only run a couple of sessions, but every session, there's always something that people will ignore or just not want to explore. I mean, and you said stuff about, they find this like great sword and then they sell it. In a lot of cases, I find that they won't even find it. Like they will just because remember, this is a living dynamic between players. I mean, it all goes back to interacting with the players involved, right? You
Yeah,
have I mean, you have a story that you want them to run, but remember, they're going to try to run it whatever way is available to them. So it's very likely that they won't even see what you're trying to make them see. And I mean, we can talk all the way about, like guiding them towards things, providing incentives,
yeah,
and we're going to bring this up again, I'm sure, throughout the stream. But yeah, like chances are there's a lot of places that they're just gonna not even see that you're right. So writing out, yeah, generally about writing stories. I mean, my suggestion would be to keep it more nebulous and just general,
yeah,
um, and focus more on kind of being able to fill the gap between yourself and the players instead of just trying to write all the possible scenarios before you even meet the players.
yeah. That's super true. I really like one of the things you're saying. So one of them is that the session is created through both of you working together. You know, the DMs and the
Yeah,
players.
yeah,
It's super true. That's one of the great things about tabletop in general. Any sort of tabletop RPG is it's a living story because you're telling the story, but the characters are also telling you the story. You know?
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
the players are as much part of the world as the story that you've created, right?
yeah, precisely. So the most important thing to remember out of all this is if you're a new DM, you're writing all this stuff for your players, you're thinking about all this stuff, slow down. So slow down, Buckaroo. You know, think about this. I cannot emphasize this enough. Do not make an elaborate epic saga. Do not assume that everything is going to go your way. In fact, the best way would be to probably start with a small quest. I'm going to use D&D and high fantasy as an example because it's a nice, easy one to work with. But work with maybe an evil wizard has taken over a castle. Perhaps a king's daughter has been kidnapped by a dragon. Perhaps some goblin stole something and the shopkeep wants you to get it back. It doesn't matter what it is, but it should be a simple and straightforward first quest, like the first sort of mission. If you're planning on having these guys together multiple times, or if you want to make a long story, so something that is actually a saga or quest, or sorry, a saga or a epic. You want to have first couple of little quests just to get everyone, get all the bad little kinks out of the way first. First time role players will often be absolutely awful, or they'll be amazing. I know one guy. Oh, I don't know if he's listening. I hope he does. If you're out there, Hutso, you were an absolute beast, and I loved every time we ran anything because that guy knew how to run something. Just anytime he'd be great. I loved it. And yeah, what it is that for other people, some people jump in like a fish into water. Some people need to open up a little because they may not be super comfortable at first. So this first quest gets everything, all that stuff out of the way, and yeah, like one of the most important things that you'll get out of it though is if you decide to continue after this, you have well, first off, if you end here, nothing is lost, you know, because they had their little quest. Either everybody was very happy by the end of it, or they just bubbled their way through, and you know, no plot points were like no plot points should be given here. It's just a story, a simple fairy tale basically. But by the end of it, if you continue, you now have some really important things. First off, you know a lot more about your players. If they don't care about little plot details, if they like to kick down the door and kill everything, you know that now. And your players now have characters that they're invested in, so that when you actually run your big main quest, you have some context to keep everyone together, and you have a nice little ragtag group of vagabonds that actually they're bonded over something because it's like they say, nothing beats nothing beats a good adventure to make people into real close allies, comrades in blood or whatever that is. You
Mhm.
want to add anything?
Oh yeah, 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 absolutely. I actually very much like your point there about the well, crap, I forgot what I was going to say. But no, what I was going to say is that it's very important the context that you get from meeting the players,
Yeah.
right? Because if you remember, like, especially across multiple different campaigns, if you run a smaller campaign before and then you run maybe a larger campaign later with the same group, they may be different characters, but they are still the same players. So, I mean, it doesn't matter if, in the small campaign they run like a chaotic neutral rogue or something, and then in the main campaign they run a lawful good paladin. Doesn't matter because the player behind that character is still the same. So a lot of the choices and decisions they're going to make are still very similar. So by learning about the player in this shorter campaign, you can then see what drives them, what you can use to, maybe lure them towards a certain path if you want to lure them that way, or maybe if you want to open up some options for them. You can know that player and you can work with them much much better, and that doubles down with experience that you get, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so I mean, I think it's a better way of kind of
Looking at it, yeah.
yeah looking at it.
One thing I'm going to say is first off, we might need to slow down a little because we're kind of talking fast. Um,
Sure.
but the other thing is learning someone's character. You are completely right there. I've had to learn that the hard way. And once you figure out what someone likes to do, it's a lot easier. I'm not even going to say it's a lot easier. It's just a lot more fun for everyone. Because if someone's stuck in a role that they don't like to do, if your healer, your cleric, or whatever it is does not like to just sit back and heal everybody, you're just gonna have a bad time.
Hmm.
Everyone's gonna have a bad time. So finding the right role for people is so important. Like you'll actually get really interesting things out of it too. Like I've had a person who was really disengaged from the campaign in general until we put him in as a barbarian, and all of a sudden he was super into it because I think what he needed a sort of character that he could just kind of he liked to smash things. He didn't like to have a complex spell book. He wanted to hit things with an axe and he wanted to hit them real hard. So I gave him that, and you know what? All of a sudden he's actually doing much better with his character. I love his character, to be honest. Don't know about the rest of the party. I think they do. And it's just we have some really entertaining scenes that come out of it, especially from the fact that we've got this guy who's playing this big raging berserker, and he's the nicest guy you know. So he well generally. So when he get those two things together, you get a little bit of an odd. I guess it's sort of a Shining esque type character who's oddly just off enough that he think he's going to start muttering something about murdering someone. It's just entertaining though. The point is find what people like to do and make sure that you go slow because just everyone needs to ease into it, and you are probably overstepping yourself. Just breathe a little. Okay.
Yeah.
So from here, let's move to the next topic. We're just going to be going through these in general because this is the first stream. I'm not expecting it to go amazing. This is just kind of outlining topics in general that we could then go into detail more later if we end up doing more streams. I'm gonna see how this the sort of reception on this is. I'll probably do it anyways because it's fun, but especially you guys on Funny Junk because that's the main group that I was making this for. If any of you guys have any questions or anything, just come on here. I'll be leaving links to the Discord and to the whatever else all over the place if I can get away with it without being marked as spam. I want to hear some some questions from people out there. I want to get some real dialogue here. So with that in mind, we have the next topic, which is unruly players. This is a big one. Unruly players are just as common as good players. In my experience, you'll typically the really bad players, the bad stuff won't come out at first. It'll come out after a few games, and once it starts, it just gets worse and worse. Eventually, they'll sort of become that guy. If you know that sort of meme, that sort of archetype, that guy. Um, it's the one who ruins the fun. It's the one that makes the DM ever regret ever running the session. They're toxic. They, oh god, I hate using that term, but they really are. They poison the well. They are rules lawyers. They are really creepy. They are, I don't know, potential sociopaths. What they decide that when they meet up with an obstacle, instead of working with the party to overcome it, no, they got this, and they're just going to run through everything before anyone else even gets a chance to look at it. This is really bad. So typically, the first thing to remember is nobody ever thinks that they are that guy, unless they're out to shit on everybody's fun in the first place. If they're out to do that, then man, just kick them. If they are there to ruin everyone's fun in the first place, there's the door, because you don't want that. Or on the other hand, if they're the type of person who just is clearly incompatible with it, they just can't role play, they can't take it seriously. And it's not like they can't role play as in they're just not good at it. It's more like they refuse to engage at all in that sort of character behavior. They're playing it like it's Final Fantasy and everyone, or an MMO or World of Warcraft or whatever, and everyone else is playing it like it's Dungeons and Dragons. They're gonna be just terrible. They're gonna put buckets on the innkeeper's head, and they're gonna immediately get all the town's guard arresting them, and it's just dumb. Just get rid of them. Those ones you cannot reason with. You can't negotiate with them. They are out to destroy. But if you have someone who you think might have some redeeming qualities, first take some time and talk with them. Talk with the player. Talk with with your players. If it's because you can have it, maybe multiple people. Maybe the only one that actually feels like they're really invested is you. If that happens, take some time out of game and talk about it. Talk about your particular gripes as they appear. Is it some annoying habit? Do they always insist on checking every single rule for every single action when everyone else just kind of wants to go with it and you're just kind of hand-waving rules in general? I'll talk a bit more about the idea of just hand-waving stuff. There's some rules. There's a golden rule, I'd call it, about it. I'm not going to talk about it right now, though. Maybe in a little bit I will. But if they just are being non-stop obnoxious, you got to let them know. You got to be like, man, it's really disruptive. It's just not what the rest of the players are doing. You have to be politely but firmly telling them what the problem is and having them explain to you why, what their view on it is. Because you were going to say something, or?
Oh, sorry. No, that was just
Okay. Because there's actually a really bit. Oh, we got some actual things in the chat. Yeah, players whining about stuff. Yeah. There's a guy in the chat talking about this. Yeah. This type of stuff he's talking about. Players whining about not getting kills. Players forgetting sessions all the time. That's the worst, actually. Players who forget sessions and make other plans. Oh, that one heats me. But yeah, spending at next 3 hours discussing your action because talking is a free action. All this stuff, you've got to talk with them about it. You've got to be like, we have to figure something out. And if you can't, then, there's going to be some real problems. But there's another really important thing is if everyone else is terrible, it might be you. Like, I hate to say it, but not everyone is cut to be a DM either. If all of your players are being obnoxious, trolling, all that stuff, it could actually be that they're responding to the way you're running it. This is why it's so important that first step is the dialogue, because if your players say, look, we don't like this character that you keep pushing on us. We don't like this one quest line that you have us doing. We don't care about killing goblins anymore. We've killed 800 goblins. We're tired of goblins. You have to be able to listen to them. Or if they, if they say, that's crap. That entire little encounter we had, that was completely unfair. Even if your intention was that, oh yeah, it's super hard so that they're supposed to go another way, Maybe they didn't get that. But there's a fine line, between they're just complaining because they did something really, really dumb and they're reaping the consequences of their actions, and you're a bad DM. Definitely something where you have to think about, though. That's what I'm trying to say, is you have to think about this from both sides. But if we get past that and we know it's the players, then there's only one option left for you. Strike one. And I'm going to be quite serious here. You give them one strike. If they get the second strike, they're gone. You have to sit them down. You have to tell them, look, you are disruptful. You are ruining everybody's fun. And if you do it again, I'm gonna have to kick you. This is one of the hardest things for DMs, because nobody likes to kick their friend from the party, but some people actually cannot and should not be playing just tabletops in general, because they're out of control. They have problems. They have some sort of problem. It could be they just cannot help but be munchkins. They cannot help but min-max everything. It can be that they just can't take anything seriously. But regardless of, or maybe it's just that they can't get to sessions on time, keeping them there is going to actually be a lot worse than kicking them. Because if you can't lay down the law there, then they're just going to keep making things worse and worse, and eventually they're gonna crash the campaign. It's poison. You cannot let them, you cannot let that guy fester in a campaign. That guy is the worst cancer that can be inflicted upon a game. They will kill it. And anything you want to add to that?
More so than that, I actually have a question about kicking people from the party.
Yeah, sure.
So, because I've never actually had experience with people being like so over the top that they need to be kicked. Because usually it would rise up, and I'd say like, no, this isn't, like, for example, someone who would try to do something with a character with an NPC, and they would roll a 20, let's say, and I'd say, well, I mean, you rolled a 20, but in persuasion, but there's no way that this character would have done anything. So, and actually, like your rule, I think it was, you said you can't kill a demon with a Glock on a 20.
Yes.
Like no matter what, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's kind of like that. That's kind of, I use kind of words to dissuade them. So far that's been working fine. But what happens when you actually have to kick someone, and how do you fill that spot? Like if you made a campaign for 4 people and now you've kicked one, you got 3.
Yeah.
So maybe you can't actualize everything, right?
Oh yeah. This is a hard one. This is a really hard one. So I've actually had to deal with this personally. The case I had to deal with was someone who was very much into optimization. They just love to optimize everything. Sorry if you're watching, but yeah, there is a reason why we did have to kick you. And what it came down to was that they were very, very anal for the rules. Every time we had any sort of improvisation that went off rules, they would get really, ticked off. They would we would spend hours just looking over the, player's handbook and looking over the DMG for how would you set this. Whereas my decision was, you want to do that? Sure. Just go for it, man. Give me a roll. I'd make up a roll for it. And what happens is you have to sit them down and you have to say, just look, if we clearly we are not compatible for this. Like, you don't always just use these words, depends on, if you know them, you're going to want to use your own version of this, but you're going to have to be firm. Like, it's this polite but firm attitude that you need to have, because the DM is kind of the person who's keeping everything together. So you've got to be able to tell them, look, you are clearly not set for this, and you're going to have to go. Like, it's mean. Give me a second. It's mean, but there's nothing else. There's no way other to look at it if they're not willing to loosen up. And that's what that first strike is for. And the reason why I only say 2 strikes is because you give them the first strike, and if they start falling back into it. Because if they're that kind of personality, then no amount of reminders is going to help. They're just going to keep coming back to it. Give me a second. Sorry. just getting a drink. But yeah. So when you have that hole, that's actually the biggest fear for DMs is, oh no, I've kicked out that player. The prophecy said there would be 4 heroes, and now there's only 3. So the first thing is hope to God you have a replacement on short notice. But if you don't, there's 2 ways you go about it. One is DMPCs. A lot of people will, yeah, I see you there in the chat. Hey, Ilarius. I see you there. If you want to come in, we're gonna have a Q&A in a bit. If you want to have any extra questions, but I did mention your stuff a little. Anyways, if you have that sort of group that, sorry, I just got a little distracted. If you have to kick them and you don't have another replacement, you're gonna have to use DMPC, and nobody might like that DMPC, but. Well, no. I'm going to correct myself, actually. You don't always have to use a DMPC. This can actually become a fun little thing where if one player has to go, well, first off, you're going to have to write them out. They die a tragic death. They decide to part ways for whatever reason. But after that, maybe there's now only 3. Maybe that's going to throw the prophecy way out of whack. As we said before, D&D and any sort of tabletop are dynamic stories. They're evolving stories. Your players are telling the tale as much as you are. What happens to that prophecy when one of the chosen ones is gone? That can be a whole topic. That could be a whole quest thing. If you want to still save your session, maybe usually you find a DMPC or you find someone else to fill the role, but maybe there's a secret second prophecy. Maybe the guy's dog is the fourth legendary member of prophecy. You got to improvise is what I'm saying. Go specifically to your thing is getting back to what you're saying is if you have to kick someone, you have to kick them. What happens afterwards is up to you and your remaining players. Maybe you make a new session, maybe you make a new campaign. If everyone still wants to run that campaign, though, you have to improvise, and that's the flavor. That's the most essential thing that I can say is you gotta be able to adapt. If you have anything else,
yeah. So I guess you're saying you have to be able to adapt, but you have to be decisive about it, right? You can't just meddle around. You can't be like, oh, maybe next time they'll do better. Or
exactly. That is exactly what I'm saying, because that attitude right there, maybe they'll be better next time, is what destroys sessions, because you keep giving them that extra chance and they don't get better, and it'll just become worse and worse, because
I see.
whatever it is that's causing them to become so bad is probably something that they personally dislike. It could be like in the case of my guy, he didn't like the way we were being so flexible with the rules, and that doesn't get better. That doesn't get sort of more kind or smooth as it goes. It's not like he's suddenly going to stop taking offense to that. No, it's going to just get worse.
Yeah, because it's a base part of what he came into D&D to experience, right? So if he's not getting it, then he's not getting it.
Precisely. Yeah.
Okay.
You want to say something?
No. That's thanks. Yeah, you answered my question a lot, so it's good.
Yeah, and Ilrius said in the chat, no plan survives first encounter. You're completely right there. No plan survives first encounter. No story survives first that guy. Everybody's going to get a that guy eventually, unless you are one of those blessed few. And you have to be firm is the biggest thing. You are the DM. At the end of the day, you are kind of the arbiter of the story. You are the dungeon master. And people do not really consider the fact that once you've started doing that, the players are going to view you slightly differently. You're basically the adult of the group, so to speak. Like, as dumb as that sounds, You are the adult. Everyone else is you're the registered. I sometimes like to think of it as the Tard Wrangler, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's all true. It's
It
all true.
it really is, and you will find as you go that you probably will become the designated Tard Wrangler. Um, but what it means is that you have to be able to say, "Look, you can do that," or "Look, you can't do that," because otherwise you're turning into a weird freeform RPG. Oh well, what's this Nuzzles Pounces type thing, and that is a terrible and disturbing lawless land.
Hmm.
Speaking of that, though, do you have any last thoughts on this goal?
No, basically, I just had that question, and that's about it for me. Yeah,
Okay,
everything you said was pretty good. Yeah,
yeah.
pretty sensible to me.
So next topic with that in mind is the golden rules. So don't think I've ever actually heard them referred to as anything else. Give me a second. Ilria says a question here. What do you do if most of your players are enjoying themselves, but one keeps complaining about the lack of agency, and you get disheartened? This you're talking basically about that guy. If he keeps complaining about it, what you first have to do is you're gonna have to address it. As I said, like the steps are you address it. If they don't get better, then you got to. I mean, you could try. You could really try and talk to them. Look, man, you keep complaining about this. It's really making everything disappointing. You can try and maybe bring a bit more freedom into your campaign. But if your campaign requires a particular railroad, then that is what it is. You can't appeal to everybody. Not everybody's gonna like the same thing. So out they go, and people will not be happy with that. But you have to be able to kick people. Speaking of which, the golden rules. These are the essential rules of play, in my opinion. Everybody's gonna have their own variant on this. Like every DM will have their own variant, but some of these are absolutely just everyone agrees on, and some of these actually even come straight from things like the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Player's Manual. And the first one, this is this is the golden rule. Like I call it the golden rules, but there's only really one, which is the DM is the final arbiter in all rulings. Which means if the DM says ignore that rule, you ignore that rule. The reason why is because if a rule is getting in the way, the most infamous example of this being grapple checks in 3.5. Oh boy, those are bad. If everybody is getting super frustrated with this, one of the DM's duties is to say, look, let's just, make this nice and easy and straightforward. Maybe the DM will say, give me strength roll. Players give a strength roll, the enemy gives a strength roll. Whoever wins wins, and then freedom. Whatever your improvisation is, whatever the DM's improvisation is, it's super important that the players are able to respect that, and that the DM is able to create a set of like new rulings that the players are content with. Because just remember the goal, your goal here is to have fun. Actually, that'd be a second golden rule right there. The goal of the game is to have fun. If you are not having fun, then you need to change what you're doing. Like, what are you here for if it is not for fun? Like, it's insane. Just the idea that people will get so stuck up on the rules, and I guess I'm calling back to that one guy. The idea that you'll get so stuck up on the rules is just insane to me, because if something is ruining your experience, you have to be able to adapt. Go. What do you think?
No, I mean that's like we said before, and we keep coming back to this. Actually, yeah, it's kind of funny, but I guess it's just because it's so important. Is that this is both, this is your and your player's experience ultimately, because the rules are ultimately written there as guidelines, right? I mean, generally they shouldn't be taken as ironclad. They should adapt to your situation, right?
Yeah. You're completely right. Like, I'm actually just going to quickly. I have the Dungeon Master Guide here, right? And I'm pretty sure it's like at the very beginning of the Dungeon Master's Guide, and it is. I'm trying to find it. It's okay. So it's not at the beginning of the Dungeon Master's Guide. It's somewhere in here. If you ever want to look up in 3.5, the DMG, look it up, and you will find somewhere deep in, well, not so deep in here. I'm trying to find it, and I honestly cannot find it right now. It's somewhere in here, but there is a point that these rules, like they say, these rules are just our ideas. If you have to change something, do it. Like, if you have to, like, shortcut a rule or ignore a rule, do it, because these are just guidelines. These are just suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's super important. I actually, I got so frustrated at one point, and I threw together a little tabletop RPG set of rules called GOPD, and it was a nice little thing. It was kind of like a Call of Cthulhu or Delta Green, if anyone knows that here, type game where it's very very fast paced. It was just like D20s, so kind of played like D20 Modern. And the whole idea was to keep everything super fast, and because of that, there was very few ironclad rules. It was mostly put in a just say what you want to do, and then the DM kind of makes up a set of like challenges, or maybe there isn't a challenge. Maybe there's no dice rolls associated with it. You want to open that window? Go for it, man. I'm not going to tell you to roll strength. You want to say something?
Oh yeah. No, I mean, I just wanted to comment how much actually I love GOPD, because I've been using that for all of my games so far. It's just because it's so easy to get into it, right? It's so easy to get into it for both the DM and the players.
Yeah.
It's super quick to make your characters. It's super quick. It's super easy. There's no, there's no rules that you have to absolutely adhere to. You just make up your own thing and you go along and you have fun, right?
Yeah, precisely. And I literally just thanks for plugging my game here. But I literally just took a bunch of things from like, well, actually I took like approximately 2 things. One of them from Roll20, and one of them from D20 Modern, and one of them from Mutant Masterminds, and I just kind of went, I like this, boom, we're done. And the rest of it was just make up stuff and go with it and make sure everyone has fun. And with that in mind, another golden rule I'd say is if the players really want to try something, make it happen. This is a little bit on the other side. So the first side would be, the DM has to be able to enforce the rules, and the DM has to be able to alter the rules as they see fit. And the second half of that, well, I mean, not just as they see fit, as the players need. But the second half of that is if the players want to do something, just because the rules say you can't, doesn't mean you can't do it. If the players want to ride a horse and lasso someone while singing, while using their bard special ability to sing the Scottish national anthem, then you know what? If they can make a good argument for you that is an important thing, if that is going to, I don't know, improve their intimidate check. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, why not, right? It doesn't really harm you any, right?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't harm anyone. If you can make up a role for it, and then like why not let it happen? Because first off, it makes for a much more interactive and amusing game. You get a lot more of those sort of memorable moments, those moments that will very infamously become green text and stuff like that. You'll get a lot more of them out of these kinds of improvised situations. Because, improvisation, it's the spice of life. It's the most important thing. But the more important side of this is if you're the DM who shuts down every idea the players give, soon you're going to find yourself being the DM who doesn't have anyone to play with.
Yeah, in that case, you're going to be that guy, right? Like it's...
Exactly.
Yeah, it can also come from the DM side.
Yeah, no, exactly. That guy can be just as often the DM as it can be the player, because you need to give your players the feel that they can do things, whatever they feel is necessary, regardless of what the rules say, without giving them, too much power. Because you can't have them say, "I bend the fabric of time itself and punch the boundary between life and death to resurrect my party." No, but it doesn't mean that they can't do really outrageous things like, I don't know, challenge the Grim Reaper to a fiddle contest just for the souls of their friends. Doesn't say anywhere in the rules that you can do that, but I mean...
Yeah, I mean,
You know?
Yeah, I mean the Grim Reaper can say no, but they can still try to do it at least, right?
Yeah, exactly. It really all depends on what your type of game is, what you feel about it. If you feel like the party got unfairly wiped, and then someone brings up something like that, that could be the saving grace that keeps you from accidentally being the DM that killed his party. If if that one bard says, "I challenge death to a card game for the fate of my friends' lives," oh, oh my goodness! Suddenly you have a way to not have accidentally killed them, because nobody likes to be the one who kills their whole party. But maybe on the other hand, they just the party's dumb and they died. So the death says nah, nah, or they challenges them to Yu-Gi-Oh and throws down Exodia first turn because you don't win against death.
Yeah. But if they do win, then that's going to be hella memorable. That's going to be a great story to tell, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's going to be hilarious for everyone involved.
Yeah.
So you'll get all sorts of fun things out of those little bit of just making things happen. And with that in mind, I'd bring up another golden rule, which would be, while the game should be skewed in the player's favor a little, the DM needs to be mindful of things that can break gameplay. So, in general, unless you're playing a game that is like grimdark, or is supposed to be a game where the players lose at the end, or a game that's supposed to be super hard for the players to win, maybe you're running what is it, Tome of Horrors, whatever that infamous D&D thing was that kills everyone. But in general, the players should have, unless you're running something like that, the game should always be skewed a little in the player's favor. The players, they're the heroes. They're the main characters. They got to be able to feel heroic. They've got to have that sort of oomph to them. But while you might start, giving them all sorts of strange legendary items and, homebrewed this, that, and the other, you have to be careful of things that are too game breaking. Because there could be times where you accidentally gave the players, let's just say you give them a ring of Dispel Magic, and you're like, that can't be possibly made bad, and then suddenly the players are using it to fire cannonballs out of their gun. I've seen a lot of people say, this is the DM's fault. They accidentally gave the players the ability to fire cannonballs out of a pistol because the players shrunk down the cannonballs to the size of pistol rounds and then fired them through the ring, which makes them go back to cannonball size, and then, destroy everything. Some people will say, that's the DM's fault. But if that player who can now shoot cannonballs at very quick rate and blow away all enemies, if he's completely ruined the game, like if nobody else ever gets to have fun now because every enemy in the entire game gets one-shotted, the game's ruined too. Like the players can, because a lot of people I've seen, as I said, a lot of people say, it's the DM's fault for giving that, but DMs can't see the future. Nobody knows exactly what sort of crazy shit the players are going to start. So sometimes you might make a super unbalanced item or a situation that just ruins all future encounters. In this case, as a DM, you might want to try and talk with the players a bit about it. The DM should be allowed to change things. You could go the sort of obnoxious, no fun police route of just blow up the ring with some evil big bad or something like that. But it's regardless of, or you could just have it run out of magic, or you could just always put them up against enemies who counter it. All these things tend to really piss off players. I'm just gonna say. So what I'd say is be transparent. Like, consult your players. Tell them I fucked up. You guys have caught me with my pants down, and I want to make a challenge for you guys, but I don't want every challenge to be try and make an encounter that will survive Cannon Barrage number 1. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what if you have anything to say?
No, yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think you can't really foresee everything. I personally like responding to it in the sense of, like you've got a thing that can shoot cannonballs here, but maybe it can backfire, or maybe you can accidentally miss and like hit one of your friends really hard, right? So if you add, I think, something that's a downfall to like an extremely powerful inability, right? Then that might discourage them from using it all the time. Or maybe you can set some rules in place where they can't use that. And as long as I think as you explain it to your players so they can understand it, it won't catch them with their pants down, so they won't be that upset about it once it backfires.
Yeah, precisely. The communication part is the most important part, I think, in this. Like, regardless of which path you take, whether you just make gear up all your encounters around the fact that there's now a legendary man with a cannon gun, or whatever it is. Like, we're using the cannon gun a lot, but it could just be a sword of eternal shenanigans.
That's a good example, right?
Yeah, you gave level 1 paladin a holy avenger. If you know what that is, it's a very, very, very powerful weapon for a paladin. Whatever it is, if you've unbalanced the game, you need to you either rebalance it, or, I mean, the other hand might be that you let the players run rampant. If you want a player rampage, go ahead. Sometimes player rampages are fun too, but it has to be something that everybody enjoys. Like in this case, if it's only one person, or if it's like two people, or if it's ruining the experience for a couple of people, and it's not just one guy complaining, oh yeah, he's got the good gun, what, this is garbage, which, you know what, actually that would be a fair point. But if you don't want that sort of unbalance, and your players are not just fine with that sort of unbalanced gameplay, you need to find a way to bring it back in order, because things like that can go absolutely nuts. Just completely out of control.
Yeah. No, I agree. How do you feel about noob traps, actually? Something like, something that a new player wouldn't necessarily be aware of, but then would catch them unawares and like instantly kill them. Something like that.
Oh, as in like a DM placing something that catches the new player unaware?
Yes, exactly, yeah.
I think it's only okay under one circumstance, which is the circumstance where your whole idea was to teach the players, welcome to Dark Souls, or it's the Dark Souls of D&D.
But should it ever kill them, like outright, or should it just, do some damage? Or
it only catch it only if your whole point was that the players need to, be ready to get new characters all the time. Like,
right, I see.
If you're running in a tabletop game or whatever, where players are going to be dying left and right, and they're going to be getting new characters, or if it's a battle royale, last one standing, that can be okay. But at the same time, you have to remember, it's extremely unfair, especially if it's a new player. Noob traps can be really, really mean. If you have a magic ring on a table that kills anyone who puts it on, and one of your players puts it on and it instantly kills them, and you go, haha, you're a bad person. There's no other way
bad guy
to say
times 10 right there, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's not fair.
Let's kill one of our players. Why not? Like, just for fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Ruin someone's game.
It's power tripping. That's what it is in that case. As I said, you can have those things only if the idea is to reinforce that mortality is a very important thing. And usually in that case, I would prefer to use it on an NPC instead, to try and reinforce that to players. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good. Yeah.
Like the shepherd who came in with them, takes 2 steps forward and is eviscerated by a spike trap.
That's actually a really good idea, yeah, because then that way you don't damage the party in any way, right?
Yeah.
You just teach them something without actually hurting them.
The only thing you damaged was their personal sense of safety.
Yeah, which is a good thing, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. You can scare the players a bit, but as you said, it's there in the name, noob trap.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so
like that implies the unfair sort of side of this. This is not a fair matchup that you are making here, because if you pick a fight with the DM, you're going to lose. That's the truth of it. You will not.
No, absolutely. I mean, the DM can just pull out whatever they want, really, and just crush you immediately, right? So the whole point is to have fun, right? It's not a.
Yeah, the DM, it has the terrifying ability to turn into a 10-year-old child at any point and say, "Nuh-uh, I bring out the sword of infinity +1." They can do that at any time, but they
Yep.
must resist because nobody likes that. And you're being a 10-year-old child.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, fight with that. Kind of leads into the final gold rule, which is the DM can and the DM will lie about rolls and various other things. So,
Yep.
as the DM, you will eventually have to fudge dice rolls. You may have to give or take some health from the enemy, or you might have to do just all sorts of other behind the scenes shenanigans for the sake of the pace of play in the game. Do not feel bad about doing this. I'm going to tell you that right now. If you had to fudge a dice roll, if you had to make a roll behind a screen that they couldn't see where the enemy gets a critical hit, because the point here is to reinforce that the big bad is really tough, do it. If you have to have, let's just say the players want to make some absolutely ridiculous thing and you really want to see it succeed because you have a whole idea about it, don't leave it to chance. You are telling a story, and sometimes chance should not be in it. Like if everybody at the table, including you, wants to see this really hilarious stunt succeed, say, look, I'll do the roll, okay? And then
Right, yeah.
then roll it behind your screen, or like fudge it, cheat it in some way, and then say, look, you got a natural 20, or look, you got whatever is required, because you sometimes have to. It just isn't as fun if like a good example, if you're dealing with if the players are dealing with some super tough boss that you thought you were setting up, and you realize about a quarter of the way into the fight this boss is terrible, like he has all the hitting powers of a wet paper bag, but you gave him like 400 health. Then for the sake of pace, just stop, like take a second and like go over to your sheet and just erase that little 400, and maybe that's now a 100, you know?
Yeah.
The players don't know, and it's the difference between they spend the next 2 hours fighting one guy who just will not die, who poses no challenge, or they take on a guy and they're like, he was slightly tougher than average, and then they move on.
Right. So they don't even realize that it's a boss. It's just kind of, whoopsie, and then you just kind of move on and maybe introduce another boss later or something like that, right?
Exactly. It's something you need to learn. Like if you made that mistake, well, you better learn about it later, but don't don't be that one DM who gets caught up. And I'll admit I have been victim of this before, where I have not made a boss intimidating enough, or I have made a boss too intimidating, and I've had them hit the players once and then went, oh no, what have I done? And realized that if this continues, the players are all just going to get wiped. So in a case like that, maybe either it's an honor-bound swordsman who's decided, you know what, you guys are not worth it, and leaves, which gives the players an opening to say, you know what, let's not do this fight anymore. I mean, if they just dive back in after that, you are completely justified in beating their asses. But,
yeah.
But on the other hand, it also gives you an opportunity to sort of get yourself out of that corner you just wrote yourself in, or maybe lower his health a little.
Yeah, you can gauge the player's strength as well, and then see if they're up to a challenge.
Yeah,
and then you can adjust accordingly.
Precisely. The whole point is, I like to think of it as a sort of. I mean, I think of it kind of like a movie, an action movie, or whatever it is. If in the middle of an action movie, the heroes get in a fight with a big bad monster, and then the next hour was just, you know what, even the next 30 minutes was just that one fight of them smacking each other.
Yeah, that wouldn't be very fun.
Oh, it'd be terrible.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, maybe one other one of my favorite things to do would be something like maybe the players stagger the monster back and it like falls, it like knocks down a pillar and the pillar collapses on it. Boom. You have
like divine intervention, right? You just something that people don't expect but helps them out, so they're grateful for it.
The idea is that you can totally play off all these things as I totally had that planned. If you walked over there and did that attack in that order, I totally had this planned. This was totally, I did not make up anything. I have no idea what you're talking about. But the point is, you need to be able to manipulate things just to keep the pace of play, because this is one of the most important things that the DM does, is keep everything going at a nice pace. If that means cheating, then do so. Because remember, as I said before, everything's already bent in the player to the player's advantage, unless you decide to murder them. So if everything's already bent to the player's advantage, sometimes things cheat. It happens. Just accept it, and everyone will be a lot happier. So, is there anything else you want to add to this goal?
For this slide, no. I think I'm good for this one. Yeah.
Okay.
I think I have a bunch of questions, but I think I'll save those for later for the very end of the.
Yeah, sure. Just like write them down or something, and we'll get to them.
Yeah.
So that's with that in mind. With that last sort of golden rule is super important because, with that in mind, we have to talk about the flow of play and the feel of play. This is the idea that a game should go at a certain pace. Much like how a movie will have a certain pace, you're going to have the same thing in your session. This is controlled by the DM, and this will allow you to create a certain feeling within a session or a theme. These are things that are going to keep the players interested and invested. Whether it's setting up a situation like a dungeon where they feel absolutely unstoppable for the whole thing, or whether it's making them feel completely powerless, whether it's happy or sad, funny or somber, the DM can adjust a whole lot of things here to tailor the unique experience for the players. What I'm saying here is you have to make sure that you adjust things to keep the players having this really sort of memorable experience, giving them the sort of feeling that you want. So there's a few key points to remember here. These things are this is basically when you get new players. Sorry, I'm just going off a little here. A lot of new players will miss out on this, and they'll sort of either rush things too much, or they'll have things go all over the place. Oh no, the players are supposed to be really attached to this guy. Oh no, he died. Aren't you sad? Players don't care. They don't have any any idea of it before. So, like, a few of these key points are, the first one would be, don't overwhelm the players with low-level weaklings unless the players can slaughter them with both speed and efficiency. If you're doing a war, if you're doing a war zone type situation, if you're doing a grand scale slaughter where the players are supposed to feel like unstoppable super gods, do not choke them for the next hour with level 1 goblins. Yeah. You're gonna say something?
Yeah, no, actually I have a question about this, because recently I ran into a situation where there was a holdout, right? And I still can't figure out how to make that exciting, because there was a skill challenge for one of the players, and the other 3 players were supposed to keep enemies off of that one specific player. And I just kept adding enemies into the fray. There weren't only weak enemies, but it was weak enemies mixed with stronger enemies, but they just kept coming. Yeah. And it got to the point where I felt like it was getting really slow, right? So how do you think you deal with a holdout situation, if at all?
So this is a good question, actually, because you've got sort of 2 conflicting sort of things here in the flow of field play, which is to create that sort of tension, that building tension in a holdout, you need to drag out the scene a bit. But on the other hand, in order to build suspense, you can't drag it out too much, or it gets boring. Okay?
That's right. Yeah.
So there's 2 things to keep in mind here. The first one being that you can add a bit more complexity to whatever the player's doing. A prime example of this would be something like, let's just say, well, I'm just going off the cuff here, but if you gave the players a puzzle where they're trying to, I don't know, fix a ancient fuse box or something, maybe you give them a set of puzzles. The first puzzle is easy, and the second puzzle harder, and third puzzle harder, and you give them a time limit to do them. Let's just say that they don't complete within that time limit. That's 1 turn. They can look at the puzzle again next turn. And so you keep doing it like that, and it becomes like harder and harder for them. Perhaps you give them less time, and on their end, that'll give them more pressure. Now, on the other side, how do you keep the players interested when you have to keep hitting them with a swarm? And that's one of the tougher ones. And what you do here is you need to have ebb and flow in this. You don't just send enemy after enemy after enemy. Since you're trying to build tension here, right?
Mhm.
What you'll do is you'll see this often in video games where you'll have the wave come in, a
Yeah, yeah.
big sort of swarm of enemies. And maybe you have a unique challenge in that. Perhaps I'm thinking sort of in a modernist setting or a futuristic where you have a swarm of zombies come in, let's just say, right? And
Sure.
maybe
Okay.
there's a special infected type thing, a spitter or something like that, something that
Mhm.
has a ranged attack. Suddenly, that adds a new like sort of challenge to it. Like a good way to look at any sort of combat encounter is it's a sort of puzzle. It's a how do I apply my weapon to the enemy to succeed puzzle.
Right.
Um,
Right. Okay.
so something like a sniper, if an enemy sniper is there, suddenly that adds something that someone has to go off and deal with that sniper, or everyone has to plan around that sniper. So that adds another level to something, and every time you add something like that, it should be mounting. It should be greater than the one before it. The first one's a
Right.
sniper. Maybe the second one is a bruiser, a big burly bruiser man. Um, and while you can put in little in waves in this, also remember to have times when there's a little bit of downtime, just a little bit, not too much, but you give them just a second to reload, and then the next wave comes. You'll see this all the time in video games. You'll have big waves, and then there'll be a pause, and then there'll be the last wave.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Um,
makes a lot of sense actually. Thanks.
yeah, no, exactly, because right, and it's such an important thing is, it's there's this whole thing about tension in movies where there's like this sort of arch, and it keeps going upwards until you hit like the peak of sort of tension, and then it drops back down.
Hmm.
There's a little dip you can put in right before that final peak, and I honestly love that little dip right there because it's that 1 second where someone stops and says, "I think we got them," and then
Just to accentuate the biggest peak, right? Yeah.
exactly. And then, the famous last words. And you'll see it all the times in movies. It's like, why did you say that, man? Why? You knew it wasn't the last of it. So it's that sort of idea of just putting in just enough stuff to keep them going and then push them a little further. So, like as I said, you always, like in a holdout, always push them a little further and keep the player who's doing whatever the situation is, if trying to solve the whatever sort of puzzle, repair the fuse box, let me say, or whatever it is. Good, take a sip. Sorry, but whatever it is, keep them in a very tense situation where they actually have to work against a clock, and keep everyone else in a situation where they have to work against the scenario. So basically, you're giving both sides puzzles, but on one side the player has a puzzle that both involves their brain and and an actual clock, maybe of an egg timer, and
Right.
on the other side you have players versus harder and harder mounting things because it's not like unless your turns actually run on a timer, it's probably just going to be harder and harder and harder missions.
So how would you then, if you can tell for sure that these people aren't going to solve this problem in time and they're all going to die, like how would you help them without actually breaking tension, right?
That's where you have the dip, and that's where the enemies stop running in for a second, so you give them a second of pause. Or there's actually three things that come up just off the top of my head. The first one, of course, is use just a pause in the action. A pause in the action can give them a chance to regroup, heal, buff, maybe set up a sandbag or something like that.
I see.
Maybe
So the pause needs to be actually long enough for them to be able to do something.
exactly. It's an
Right.
actual. It's not a little thing. It's
Right.
actually
Right.
going to be a significant a lull in it. But you have to make sure it's also a lull in such a way that they can actually that the puzzle isn't immediately solved. Like in the case of a fuse box, what I would do, and this is once again I'm calling on video game tropes, but there's a good reason because a lot of these guys actually know what they're doing in some cases. Could
Yeah,
be one of the fuses blows. You have to look around for another fuse, and suddenly there's no enemies coming in. Now, from an actual a narrative point of view, you can make up all sorts of reasons why the enemies have stopped coming. Perhaps the last grenade that the players threw in collapsed the doorway, and the enemies are like clawing through it, right?
Hmm.
that's an especially good one since it gives the players a real sense of oh geez, gotta keep going, gotta really gotta get ready. Or it could be just the next wave is just a few miles out and it's coming in. But as I said, that's one way. The one way is to give them a lull in the action. The second way is to have some sort of element, perhaps that you draw into their attention, or that just gives them that sort of edge they need to actually overcome the problem. Perhaps in the case of zombies, right? One of the zombies coming in maybe was was a soldier and has a really powerful gun on him.
Right.
He has a rocket launcher. He has a minigun. It could just be maybe the players, all they're fighting, knocked over a panel and there's an exposed fuel line. You shoot it and suddenly fire is shooting everywhere, and that slows down the enemy. Basically, environmental factors.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
If you remember when we were talking about the boss and fudging things, like perhaps the pillar falls over. Once again, it's a way to keep things like you can even just draw their attention. You can give them like a rule of you make a spot check. Oh, you just noticed over there. You notice over there that if you hit this pillar, you might be able to collapse things. That pillar's looking really weak.
Right.
Yeah. The players might get on your case of why didn't you tell us that before, but there's a whole bunch of ways you can even go from there.
Yeah, I mean, like if they were in a fight, they wouldn't necessarily notice it, right? You can just get away with it.
Yeah, exactly. And if it was like, why didn't we notice it when we were first prepping? Maybe the damage is what caused it to now be like all the shooting of guns, or maybe there's so many reasons you can make up.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Now the third one is only if you really do not want them to die and you need a fiat. This is the DMPC rescue. A lot of people hate this one, but it is Gandalf the White comes over the hill with his army on the third day. It is the cavalry has arrived. It is an outside force comes in and fixes their problem for them.
Right. So that's like the ultimate, if you don't want to die, like the last resort kind of thing, because that's kind of that's tension breaking, right? It just completely destroys everything that's been built up.
Exactly. Yeah. It is. There's the only good way I'd say to do it, like the only really nice way I've seen it done is where you establish beforehand that reinforcements are coming. Yes, as earlier again in the chat, DM of the Rings had a perfect page about that. DM of the Rings actually also had a perfect page about too many level 1 goblins coming at you, where they have they're talking about the siege at Helm's Deep, I think it is. DM of the Rings, for anyone who doesn't know, it's just a little comic that sort of parodies Lord of the Rings as though we're a tabletop RPG. And they have one at Helm's Deep where all the players are just super fed up with killing goblins. They're just like, I kill the goblins, and the DM asks, so you're gonna roll for it? And the guy's like, no, I kill the goblins. There's a goblin there. There's a goblin there. I kill him. We've been killing goblins for hours.
Right. Yeah.
It's that sort of situation. And Ilrius says it sucks ass because there needs to be consequences to players having bad luck or being in far of their head. Yes, exactly. No, there needs to be consequences, and you can do them in that sort of the last hour sort of savior type situation. The players can be actually heavily injured, like by whatever's attacking them. They can be just literally like inches from having their throats torn out by the big monsters that are crawling over the barricades. When a sniper takes one out, and then the cavalry comes in, they're shooting up the place, and and one guy comes up, picks him up, get out of here, soldier, and you can actually add sort of limitations from that. It can be all sorts of things, but consequences can only go so far, I'd say. Consequences need to be I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. So if the players messed up of their own accord, there's going to be a point where yes, the players are going to have to die. I'm sorry, right. Okay. You guys screwed up too hard. But if it's a lesser screw up, you don't want a lesser screw up to turn into a bigger one. So how do you limit them? Perhaps they sacrifice a weapon. It could be something like that. Weapon toll road, like you're out of, looks like that fuse is blown. You're going to need something else that's metal and on hand, and the only thing you have that would fit there is I don't know, that special magazine of super rounds that you've been you've been like keeping.
Hmm.
That's a terrible example, but
Well, I mean,
the
it
idea is
works,
there.
right? It's just something
Yeah,
that's useful, so they wouldn't necessarily want to discard, but they have to in this case.
precisely. It's you punish them in another way that's non-lethal, but will not permanently like downtrod them and keep them from ever getting back into the game.
Right.
A ranger's pet might have to die.
Hmm.
It sucks, but it's a dramatic death. An NPC might have to die. You don't know. And the point here is that you need to be able to say, you guys screwed up, so here's a punishment, but at the same time, you guys don't deserve the amount of crap you're going to get. Which actually reminds me, another point to remember here in the flow of play and feel of play would be, don't overwhelm the players with something outside their abilities to defeat.
Right.
If you want to make a tough boss, make him just a few steps stronger than the last toughest enemy that the players had to fight.
Right.
Do not make him a god. Do not send a super dragon after the party unless the party either A, has a chance of fighting it, or B, is not expected to fight it. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
If the goal in that case is to make the players run in terror from the super dragon, you should not have the monster instantly kill them. Rather, the beast should grievously wound them, maybe, or simply like put some real danger down before actually then attempting to harry them. So
Yeah,
just
because it's the same. It's the same as sacrificing like an item that you don't want to sacrifice or a pet, right? It's non-lethal, but it hurts. Basically, that's the idea, right?
But there's a problem here, which is that if the players haven't fled from any encounters before this, they may not know that they have to run. So the first thing I'd say there is make sure you've warned them a couple of times. I'd say at least 3 times that the encounter is too strong. They're going into these mines, and they have been told legends once about the deadly demon that goes down there and killed an army of men. And they go a bit further, and they're told about the Balrog and how he killed everyone who was living down here. And the third time, the Balrog comes around the corner, and he's 60 feet tall. And everyone looks at him and goes,
Maybe this is not such a good idea. Maybe,
And you have to really, if you're doing something like that and you expect them to run, you have to really bring it home. You have to really describe just how terrifying this is. Heck, you could maybe have one of the guys literally just, lose his mind, just start running and, screaming like a coward. Because you need to sort of reinforce, if you fight this, you will lose. So, once you've done that, you need to give them a window of opportunity.
right.
If they get stuck fighting it, you are really going to need to give them like I typically say, if they get stuck trying to fight it because they're like, we see that Balrog, let's do this, then give them a small window of opportunity. Perhaps in the case of a dragon, the dragon sees some livestock fleeing in terror and decides that the livestock are a far better meal. Or the Dark Knight is honor bound not to fight weaklings, and he's gives you one chance to flee. In that case, though, make it really obvious. Like maybe the Dark Knight cuts off your arm first.
This thing's gonna kick your ass. It's not gonna.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But at that point, if the players decide to stay and fight, feel free to kill them. This is actually a nice little thing, though, because sometimes if player characters die, they might actually get to have that nice, glorious final stand. And players like those. While I said at the beginning of this, don't overwhelm them with something outside their ability to defeat. On the other hand, that might be part of the field of the game. If it's for like a 40k only war or something like that, perhaps it's the guardsman's last stand against a Tyranid army coming in. Perhaps they bought time for that last group of civilians to escape. Situations like this are good because, first off, it's still within the field of play. And secondly, it gives them that really nice chance to really exert a sort of valor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, because then if they die, they're just not in vain, right? At least they feel like they've still accomplished the final goal, even though their characters are dead.
Precisely.
Right?
Glorious.
So it's still a win, technically speaking, right? It's not. It doesn't feel like a loss, even though you've died.
Yeah, that's a super important one. And in that same sort of just generally the same sort of idea, if your players get stuck on a puzzle, you need to find ways around that.
Mhm.
So, like, if your players are in a situation where you like puzzles, you give them a puzzle in a dungeon, and it's simply outside their ability to solve because A, they're dumb, or B, the puzzle is super obscure, or C, you've decided, to be big brain and lord your amazing wisdom over them. Um, if they can't figure it out, either make in-game hints or give alternatives. Um, if a dragon is hoarding a huge amount of wealth that he stole, and he will not give it back unless someone beats his puzzles, maybe he's also willing to play a different game of wits with the party.
Right.
Maybe
Okay.
he's willing to take something else in exchange. Maybe he is just really bored and he wants a friend. It could be something that's stupid sometimes. Yeah,
Just as long as it's an alternative, right? It's
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
The idea is that nobody likes to feel dumb.
Mhm.
Um, and nobody likes and additionally nobody likes it when you tell them the answer,
Right.
because they're too dumb to figure it out.
Because then they still feel dumb, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
However, if the players do not like your puzzle, they're just going to sit there and they are going to be grumpy.
Hmm.
Um, Although, on the other hand, if they do like your puzzle but they just suck at it, maybe give them more time. Uh,
Hmm.
the typical way you could tell if your players actually are just absolutely hating your puzzle is if they start looking for ways around it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's one infamous case of a big ass door made of adamantine that had a puzzle in it, and the players decided, nah, we're just gonna dig out everything around the door.
Oh.
Yeah, and
What?
I mean, on one hand, yes, yes, that's a solution, and you can give that to them.
I
But on
mean,
the other
yeah,
hand,
but
they are kind of
yeah,
telling you
it means they
something.
really don't like your puzzle. Because
Yeah,
holy crap, they
yeah,
literally went around it.
that's what I mean. It means that do not like it, and you should probably not give them that kind of puzzle in the future because they're going to do
Hmm.
that to you again.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, because I've noticed that when things like that start happening, what you'll get is cases of the DM makes a bigger door with even more adamantine around it because, haha, now the players can't do it, and then the players disintegrate around that or they teleport
Yeah.
through it, and you just get into
Uh,
this game of
yeah, it's just a slap fight at that point. No one really wins.
exactly. No, nobody does win. It's just you're just wasting everyone's time, and
Hmm.
everyone is just trying to be asses to each other.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's good. I think we're good for this.
Yeah. Okay. So, with that, we're going to move on to the next topic. So next one is death of a game. This happens to the best of us. It's a combination of factors. It's can be bad players, can be bad DMs, it can be incompatible players and DMs, and it sucks. It really, really sucks, especially for a new DM. It can be the worst thing to happen. If it's a bad player, then the fate of the session's on you. So, as I said before, in the case of that guy, you got to kick him and you got to keep going. In this sort of tabletop type game, the DM is the heart of the session. You are
Hmm.
going to be kind of like that player that keeps everything moving. You're going to be the one who drags everyone back to the table. So you have to be able to take a hit and keep going. Um, I know a really good, like a perfect example is I know a guy who wants to run sessions and he does every once in a while, but every time he does, he takes these. He sometimes it'll be he brought in that guy and that guy completely derailed the session, or maybe it's just that he heard someone complaining and he took it a little too personally.
Hmm.
Um, but the thing is that in these cases, because he folded, that's what killed the session. Um, if if the session does die, what you have to be able to do as DM is say, okay, what do you guys want to play next? That's the most important thing that you can do, because the reason why typically someone becomes DM is because nobody else wants to do it. It could also be you have that particular I'm gonna call it a spark. It's this sort of, it's a creative town. It's like people who like to do art. It's like people who like to do music. It's the art of storytelling.
Right.
And
Yeah.
a lot of people think it's, kind of gone. It's done. It's old, but no, it's still important. It's still a thing. It's the oldest art, really.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's always going to be a thing. Like storytelling mediums may change, but it's
Yeah,
always going to be around, right?
exactly. So if you're the storyteller must be able to have this sort of resilience, and that resilience is kind of what's going to keep everyone here. It's going to keep everything going. You're as I said, in Captain Planet terms, your heart. Nobody
Mhm.
likes him, but he's there.
Can't do without them.
Yeah,
Yep.
can't do it without him. It's just so important, and if for the friend for that guy who is watching, um, seriously, you need to be able to sort of roll with the punches. If you let anything become too serious, too personal, it's going to really sort of hurt your chances of making another session. Um, in this guy's case, he's a great DM, but you need to be able to move past that sort of I'm gonna call it the artistic sensitivity. Um,
Hmm.
it's the same thing where some artists will, someone insults your art and, oh, I never want to make art again.
Yeah, it's the ability to take criticism.
Yeah. You have to, like what I'm saying is, learn from your mistakes, but don't give up.
Hmm.
It won't happen unless you do. Like, um, I used to be super involved in my session, and I took criticism badly, and I was super bummed out when people would leave and stuff. But what I learned was you've got to sort of you got to move past that, and you've got to find some other thing to keep you going.
Yeah,
Um,
it's how you learn.
yeah, but I mean, so like in my case, it was a combination of the sort of determination to finish it and a bit of raw spite for my players.
Hmm.
Like some of them tried to derail it, some of them tried to end it because they don't know how to schedule anything. But on one hand, I know that they really want to, so and I want to finish this, so we're going to finish it. And on the other hand, they perma DM'd me. They stuck me
Hmm.
in the DM chair and they never let me leave. So now they get to sit here and listen to the rest of my crappy story. That is their punishment. Um, but regardless of your reason, whether it's hate, lust, greed, pride, whether you actually have one of those very rare sessions that's completely intact and is not filled with terrible, terrible people, um, I'm just the best thing I could say is, chin up, man. You need to be that. You need to be the pillar of support. You need to be the adult, and you need to be able to say, my session my session is over. My game is over. Why did it happen? What did I learn? And how can I improve? You know,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. There's just too many people around here who I see could totally be DMs. They just they need a little bit of heart. You need a little bit of oomph. And it's super disappointing when I see them not uh, doing like producing any content, because I know they have it in them. I know they have it in them, but they don't.
Yeah, I mean, it also I think comes down to the fact that whether you want to actually do it or not. I mean, you might try it out and it might not go so well, and you may say, this is maybe not for me. But if you try it out and then it doesn't go well, but then you say, no, I'm going to try it, and it's going to work, and then you go ahead and learn from your mistakes and you get more experience. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like learning from your mistakes. Nobody like, because as I said, if you're when you're a new DM, you're not going to be Leonardo da Vinci. You're not going to
Mhm.
be one of the greatest ever. Your ideas will suck. You might accidentally put weird, creepy stuff in. You might accidentally bung up in a bunch of different ways. And if your game dies, that it happened. It happens, and you've got to learn from it. Don't
Yeah.
don't let it die. We need more good DMs out there because this killed me. I remember a while back on Funny Junk, someone made a DM server. It was going to be a bunch of people coming together to roleplay all sorts of stuff. Any of you guys listening, you know what I'm talking about. And they had an LFG type thing, looking for group, and all it was players looking for sessions. And I looked at this and I thought, this is a terrible idea because so many people want to play, but so few people want to DM. So
Right.
you need to be able to, like, it's not like there's no players out there. There are players everywhere. If you are one of those few DMs who actually has the sort of guts to be a DM, you are a diamond in the rough, mister. So don't just give up, man. Your players will root for you. Everybody's going to root for you. No, we need more good DMs like you out there. And if you haven't DM'd yet, maybe you should try it. Just what could it hurt? Your group of friends might insult you. So what? They didn't try. And man, I don't even know where to go from here because it's just such a thing that I've seen. It drives me nuts because I see it so often. Cannot emphasize that enough. There's so many potentially good DMs out there who give up on themselves. You need to. It might be hard. Find a little bit of self-confidence in your just deep down in there, but you got to do it, man. Just if you don't do it for yourself, do it for that sort of future self. Do it for that future kick-ass DM version of you.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're interested in DMing, then it's just like writing. Like nobody. People say it's like what's how do you write well? And it's like, well, you start out and you write crappy, and then you keep going, you write less crappy, and eventually you write good.
Yeah.
Right. It's
exactly.
Rome's not built in a day, and neither is any skill really. So I mean, it's just patience and hard work. That's it.
You're 100% right. So with that in mind, I'm going to move on to Q&A. So anyone want to come in and talk about anything? Oh, apparently my thing is gone. Oh, that is sad. Give me a second here. This is embarrassing. My image has disappeared.
Oh no.
Yeah. I missed the last and most important slide of all. I goofed. And
you might want to repost the link to the Discord as well, because if new people come in after it's initially been posted, they won't see it.
Yep, that was the plan. So from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to post the link to the Discord, and what we're going to do is anyone who wants to sort of come in and ask any questions, here it is. It is open, and just put a little message in the chat that you want to come in, and Golem will bring you on.
Yep.
Just jump into the tavern or just leave a message. We're watching. We'll be on for the next, maybe 30 minutes to an hour. If anyone else wants to come in here, show's open. So until then, I think we should just keep going with this sort of idea that talking about new players, which is
yeah, I mean it's a good thing. I mean, I'm a new player. I actually have a bunch of questions that I can ask in the downtime that we have.
Yeah,
so
here we go.
That should be pretty good. So we're talking about death of a game and just booting players and getting new players in. I'm actually trying to write a new campaign here, and how do you feel about dynamically bringing new people into your campaign? Like, if you've structured your campaign around 4 people, let's say, how easy is it to bring in extra players, like up to 6 maybe, but along the lines, like not immediately, but like in and out kind of thing?
I see what you're saying. So that's a tough one. Give me a second. Sorry, just drinking my water. So bringing in new players is always extremely hard. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you. The biggest problem is bringing them up to speed with whatever you're doing. Bringing them up to speed with sort of the theme, the feel. If they're a new player, sort of getting them in with the dynamic of the group. So what I'm going to say is this. The first and most important thing is if your campaign is built in such a way that you're planning on having more people in, do not make it a very complicated theme. Like, do not make a deep political intrigue with so much like plot and suspense that it's coming out your goddamn ears. Because anyone who comes in will come in lumbering in like a troll who's half blind.
Right, because there's a lot to get behind, and there's no way that they could have gotten behind it, right?
Exactly. So, in the case, like, I'm gonna just throw something together. So, if you have, let's just say it's in like some sort of space future, okay?
Sure. Okay.
You know, just a rogue trader type setting, where everybody, which is a setting where it's basically Pirates of the Caribbean but in space, but with 40k type elements. So, in a situation like that, you can bring in people fairly easily. Because you can have a dynamic crew, you can have a dynamic group of people, and all they really need to know is that we're pirates. This guy's the captain. This guy's the first mate. This guy's this. You don't need to give them the specifics. You don't need to give them a whole lot. And because you've given a very dynamic setting, it's actually it's just like Star Trek, old Star Trek, where you can have you can have different characters come in for different episodes, so to speak, and they can come in and come out, give a little bit of focus. As long as you have a few core people to carry it, it usually works well. But that being said, much like in Star Trek, you're going to need a very episodic style. By that I mean you cannot remember what I'm saying. Take everything that I'm saying here with a grain of salt. It is possible to move around these problems, but if you're in such a situation where you're hoping to have people come in and out all the time, you need to give proper pauses for people to come in and come out. These need to be breaks, like full breaks in the action. It can be the start of a new story, a subplot within your story, whatever it is, and you need a good reason. So I guess what it really comes down to is you need a opening for them, and you need a reason for them.
Right. So what you're saying is that you can't, whenever you bring new people, essentially you're starting a new story or a new sub story, essentially, right? So you can't just hash them into the middle of it and just expect it to work.
Yeah, precisely. As I said, think about it like a new episode. You still have the same overarching plot,
right?
But different episodes could be related to different plots.
Okay.
Yeah. I actually remember one where it was the people were talking about having a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure type campaign, and they had one guy miss one session, so he had a session later where it was like his own sort of side character episode. And something like that is a completely thing because you have that sort of episodic style.
Right.
Yeah, where people can drop in and drop out as they feel, as they need to. But I feel like that's the most important, easy way to set that type of thing up. Yeah. So, next question.
Yeah, no, that was really good. Other than that, I mean, can't really think of anything off the top of my head. But just generally, if for starting a new campaign, how many rule sets would you go through to decide which is right for you, right? Because I mean, there's multiple rule sets for.
That's a good one.
There's you got 3.5, you got 4. I think it's up to 5 now, right? So
yeah, I think we're at 5e now.
And that's just for fantasy, right? That's
just for D&D actually. That's not counting Pathfinder. That's not counting. I don't know.
So how would you suggest going about actually picking out a rule set that's right for you, or at least something that you feel comfortable with, depending on the story?
The first thing I'm going to say is I am not a master of this. I have played a few, but I can only give my personal opinions on them. The most important thing when finding rules is first off making sure that it's a rule set that everybody knows.
Right.
Like if you decide to do 3.5, you need to make sure that everyone else can play 3.5. If you are playing 5e, everyone else needs to be able to play 5e. If you're taking something that is too hard for the players, like if the rules are too intimidating for the players, then nobody's going to want to play. So it's not actually just even about your compatibility with it; it's your players' compatibility with it too. So
See.
what I could say is there's a few things, like I can't give you a guaranteed way because it's going to really differ for each group of people, but there are a few things to keep in mind. If you have a bunch of players who are a fan of a particular setting or a particular archetype or a theme, so if you have a bunch of players who are a fan of Warhammer 40k, there are a ton of Warhammer 40k tabletop RPGs that you can play. Choosing one of them is going to be good because you have your players invested. If you have a lot of players who are big fans of Cyberpunk, there are Cyberpunk ones. There's tons of Cyberpunk ones actually. And there's the thing is there is a like tabletop RPG for pretty much every setting imaginable, and a lot of them you didn't think were a thing. So, like finding the right one is really going to come down to what does everybody want to play. It's like finding a board game actually. Everyone needs to be everyone needs to be up for Monopoly before you play Monopoly.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So with that in mind, the most important thing that I'd say is look for something easy to start with. There are all sorts of people out there who are a lot smarter than me who can give like lists of what's hard, what's easy, and there are a lot of other channels out there who give like well in-depth explanations about how to properly work these different sessions or these different mechanics. What you need to be able to do is find one that fits you, and if you can't figure it out yourself, maybe spend a little bit of time listening to some YouTube channel talk about it. Yeah.
Is there a lot?
Is there a
Is there a
lot?
lot of stuff like that out there? Is there
Oh,
YouTube
there's
channels
a
or
huge
streams
amount of
or
stuff out there.
Discords?
Discords, I don't know, but if you are just looking for rules on stuff, Google it. Like you will find archives and archives and archives of just ludicrous amounts of information. It is quite impressive, actually.
Cool. Good to know.
Yeah. So with that in mind, I think since we're not getting many people in the chat asking questions, I think that's a good place for us to call it.
Yeah, let's call it a day.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in for this. If this does well, even if this doesn't, we'll probably be back in a couple of weeks. And I hope you all have a good day. And I hope you maybe learned something for this. And good night.